Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and you're watching another episode of Overbooked here on the channel. This is the series where I talk about every single book on my shelves because I need to protect my family. Today we are talking about M.L. Wong's The Sword of Kaigen. I bought this book myself or was gifted it. I genuinely can't remember. Regardless of where books come from, nobody's paying me to talk about books and all opinions are my own. I'm going to keep this as spoiler-free as humanly possible. If you do want to go in knowing nothing, pause the book, come back when you've read it, we'll talk then. I am going to talk about the overall emotional tone of the book, which might be a minor spoiler, so you do you. But I will link the story graph for the book down in the description below in case you want to check out any user-generated content warnings. And I will slow down my talking as we move into the meat of the video because I'm aware that I'm talking a bit too fast. This is a book that is technically part of a series. It's kind of a standalone book within a series called The Theonite Wars. That series is now discontinued. You can't get it anywhere, and to be perfectly honest, the people I talked to who had read it didn't necessarily recommend it, so you can just read this on its own. So don't worry about the fact that it says a Theonite War story. You don't need to know that. This is an adult fantasy book that is a little bit shiny, so I will put it down for now. It originally came out in February 2019, so it's getting on a little bit now. M.L. Wong is an author and martial artist based in Wisconsin, and they have a new book that's out now, I think, called Blood Over Heaven, which I will definitely be trying to read. I'll pick it up again, just to read you the blurb. On a mountainside at the edge of the Kaigenese Empire live the most powerful fighters in the world, warriors capable of raising the sea and wielding blades of ice. For centuries, the fighters of the Kusanagi Peninsula have held the Empire's enemies at bay, earning their treacherous spit of land the name the Sword of Kaigen. Born into Kusanagi's legendary Matsuda family, 14-year-old Mamoru has always known his purpose, to master his family's fighting techniques and defend his homeland. But when an outsider arrives and pulls back the curtain on Kaigen's alleged age of peace, Mamoru realises that he might not have much time before he has to become the fighter he was bred to be. Even worse, the empire he was born to defend might stand on a foundation of lies. Misaki told herself that she left the passions of her youth behind when she married into the Matsuda house. Determined to be a good housewife and mother, she hid away her sword, along with everything from her days as a fighter, in a faraway country. But with her son asking questions about the outside world, the threat of invasion looming on the horizon, and her frigid husband grating on her nerves, Misaki finds the fighter in her clawing its way back to the surface. When the winds of war reach their peninsula, will the Matsuda family have the strength to defend their empire, or will they tear each other apart before the true enemies ever reach their shores? It's not a good blurb to read when you're losing your voice. Oh dear. So Kaigen in this story is based loosely on Japan, but the overall Theonite War series has an West African influence, but the series does actually take place on another planet, so these are inspired by, these aren't real-world allegories. Other things that cropped up when I was reading interviews that influenced this story, as in things that cropped up that influenced this story that I read in interviews, we got there in the end, are World War II tragedies and the influence of propaganda, which both are strong themes in this book. Under Pro 1 in my review template, I've just written, my emotions. This is one of the most emotionally devastating books I have read since I read Robin Hobb, and a lot of people compare this book to Robin Hobb, saying it's Avatar: The Last Airbender meets Robin Hobb. I don't disagree with those comparisons. It is a deeply emotional book once you're invested in it. I'll come on to the reasons people haven't liked it a bit later, but let's say you're on board with the story, let's say you get on with the writing style like I did. Deeply emotional. I found myself on a reread, knowing things that were going to happen. I would have to pause the audiobook because I was not emotionally ready for what happens next. Now, we all know I'm a crier. I cry at movies, I cry at adverts, I don't cry at books very often. This book, on both the first time I read it and on a reread, had me sobbing while walking the dog because everything about it hits all of my particular emotional buttons, I guess, and it's just so wonderful in a really sad way. You know, a sad book that just feels like catharsis? That's this book for me. And I think the way that M.L. Wong handles that build of emotion and the break of emotion in both the book as a whole and the emotions of the individual characters, so wonderfully done. And not just sadness, but also anger and joy and release, I guess, just generally being a theme. Oh, powerful. Because we're dealing with a very specific family, we have the perspective of the mother, Misaki, and the son, Mamoru. This is a very family dynamic focused plot that can make things very difficult because there are some difficult family dynamics going on, to put it lightly, in this very patriarchal society. It's still a really good place for the book to kind of sit. It's grounded in that this is a story of a family, and we see how the world at large impacts these individuals in this very specific place. One of the things that I like about this book, and one of the reasons I would recommend it, is wherever you think it's going to go when you're at the start of the book, it's not going to end there. And the pacing is really interesting. The plotting of it is not what you would anticipate, and that makes it feel very fresh as a fantasy book, especially if, like me, you're used to that very clear 3-act structure. I found myself wondering where the book was going to go when it got to the point where I assumed the book would end, and there was just so much more to build on and so much more for these people to deal with in a way that was profoundly touching. And I think, again, tied into that theme of war being something that affects people not just in the big moment, but it has a long tail to it. Very profound, very honest, very good framing for a book. I am a person who typically does not enjoy combat scenes, both in films, books, all other kinds of media. I tend to kind of glaze over during them, just tell me who won. In this is my exception. I think the combat in Sword of Kaigen is wonderfully written. You can tell that ML Wong is a martial artist when you read these. I think the use of combat to build character and to understand a person better is really good. The combination of the magical power and the actual doing the martial art, very wonderful. We have ice-based magic in this. There are people who have wind-based magic. Both of them are described in such a way that I could picture them really vividly in my head, and I never felt myself getting completely lost in combat, which is usually what happens to me. The combat as a way to move story on and to move character forward isn't something I see in a lot of books, and if you're put off by the idea of a bit of a military fantasy, this is not that. This is really well-written combat scenes. Other people should take notes. It is a bit long. The paperback that I have is 613 pages. I did it by audiobook both times that I read it, and I think that is the way to go. The audiobook narrator is very good. If you're like me and you struggle with pronunciation, it makes that a little bit easier, and you get to enjoy the pain being put directly into your ears so you can cry while on a walk. Who doesn't want that? It is a bit long. I personally can see some elements where things could be sped up, but I do really enjoy the whole of this book, so I'm not too mad at it, and I've read much worse 600-page books. There are some really difficult scenes in this for a number of reasons, and I think that there are some things that might feel a bit messy that in other books would be very cut and dry, leave him kind of stories. I would look up the content warnings, and I would go into this book knowing that it is inspired by tragedy. Both of those things are important to bear in mind. I wouldn't go in expecting a fun, fantasy, magical powers, Avatar kind of time. And lastly, I do know some people in my life haven't enjoyed this. A couple of people didn't get on with the writing, so bear that in mind. I'm just talking from my own personal experience. Some people didn't get on with the writing. It wasn't for them. Some people don't like those lengthy combat scenes. I think it depends on what you're interested in. It's also very much a patriarchal society. Now, I do think there are characters who are acknowledging that that is bad, but for the most part, this isn't a book about solving that problem. I think we've got very used to fantasy worlds where if there is a patriarchy set up, a portion of the book is about tearing that down, and that's not necessarily what this book is. So if you don't like reading patriarchies, or if that's something that you just have to be in the right mood for, I would also bear that in mind. Other things you might want to read if you were planning on picking this up or something similar, I was thinking Robin Hobb is my obvious one. Robin Hobb is a much lengthier series. This kind of does the emotional work that Realm of the Elderlings does in a much more condensed package, but I think that is the only other series that has got me as emotionally as the Sword of Kaigen did, and at some point I will have to sit down and really work out what the two have in common, but I do feel that devastation in my heart reading this and reading Robin Hobb. In terms of exploring traditional values and the value and what's the opposite of value? Detriment of that. Fonda Lee's Greenbone Saga series, Jade City, is the first book in that. They are so wonderful. They also stomped on my emotions. That's a much, well, not that much more of a modern setting, but more modern in this particular setting. Wonderful series. Need to do a reread. Definitely recommend those as well. The other thing that's on my list is the Masquerade series, because I think that has a lot of propaganda elements to it, exploring propaganda in a fantasy world. A little bit more about colonialism, some more questionable moments, particularly towards the later parts of that series, and that series is also not complete. But past Judith added it to the list, so I might as well also. Should you read The Sword of Kaigen? Give it a go. As I say, not everyone I know has loved this, it hasn't been a universal success, but a lot of the people who have very similar reading taste to me have also loved it. So if you frequent the channel and you typically enjoy the things I do, this might work for you. I would definitely recommend it. Personally, I would do the audiobook over reading it physically. That's just me. Have you read this? Do you have plans to? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're down there commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. You can also follow me on social media. Come hang out on Discord where we have chill chats about books. I'd like to say an enormous thank you to all the ghosts who haunt me over on Patreon. They support the channel and in return get early access to videos, bonus content, live streams, and more. If you'd like to join their number, that's linked below as well. Thank you so much for watching. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one. There's gonna be some bloopers now. I'd like to say an enormous thank you to all the ghosts. Oh, I'm being haunted by them in my throat. Where's my stop button?